A Japanese company is taking a lot of heat for manufacturing and selling these childlike sex dolls, which they claim would help pedophiles not abuse real children by giving them essentially a doll as an alternative. This is a company called Trottla, and they're manufacturing these life-size dolls. They are anatomically correct, if you folks understand what I mean, and they imitate girls as young as 5 years old, and they're being sold to pedophiles around the world. They promote more than 100 different models of imitation girls' dolls. They can be dressed in lace or leather lingerie or completely naked. I'm feeling a little bit nauseous as I tell this story, I do have to admit. The founder of the company, Shin Takagi, is a self-confessed pedophile, and he defended the product, saying these products help pedophiles to channel and control their sexual urges, and the dolls can be used to keep pedophiles away from actually doing anything to kids. This really relates to a lot of research into this issue. And there are many people, and I've read a lot of interviews with people who say, I am a pedophile in the sense that I have what is considered by some to be a psychiatric condition whereby I feel sexually aroused by prepubescent children. I cannot control the fact that I am aroused by that. What I can control is my actions. And this is something that often comes up when talking about, there's this famous real doll, which is an adult anatomically correct imitation woman. And sometimes people will say, well, the real dolls, if you give them to would-be rapists, it'll reduce the number of real-world rapes. And many people believe that that's not true, because that would only hold true if violent rape is a sexual act. And as many of us realize, violent rape is much more of a violent act than it is a sexual act, and in many cases is about power. So really, having sex with a doll is not likely to drastically reduce the incidence of rape. However, and I know, Rachel, you've looked into this quite a bit, we may be talking about a different situation when it comes to pedophilia, and there are many who think that this actually could reduce the instance of pedophiles going out and actually abusing children. I don't know how you feel.
Well, if you look at kind of prior treatment practices, they've actually proved to be largely ineffective, and they have also shown that they have not changed the sexual orientation of people towards children. And the recidivism rates for people who are pedophiles has been about 10 to 50%. So
comparatively high, in other words.
Yeah, which is comparatively high. So if I'm thinking about this doll in terms of a treatment option, I can't really imagine how it would be that effective or would change anyone's preferences if they're having this access right in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I don't know. I guess I can imagine how in the short term, an individual, if they had one of these childlike sex dolls, would say, okay, today, the childlike sex doll is going to keep me home and not out being a predator to a real world child. But like Rachel is saying, we know that there has really been no effective way to make someone who seems to be predisposed to like little kids sexually eliminate that predisposition. And with such a high recidivism rate, I'm more focused not on the morality of this, but on the practicality. And it's a pretty big question mark for me.
I feel it's kind of like, drugs, in that a drug addict, while they put them on this other drug that's going to help them in a short term, they're still addicted to drugs.
So you're saying methadone or Narcan being used, Suboxone, etc.
Exactly. I think it's the same thing, that no matter what, when either they run out of money or the doll breaks or the doll gets stolen, they're still going to, go back to this recidivism that we talk about, and it's still going to be a problem at the end.
Well, if we want to use the drug analogy, Rachel, there are people who do successfully kick drug addiction through something like methadone. I mean, it's seen very negatively in many ways, and the lack of the failure rate is very, very high, as Jason is correctly alluding to. But it does actually work for some people who then, when they are around drugs, they say, I remember what it was like in my life. And even though I have a predisposition to addiction to drugs, I'm not going to fall back into it. Could it be that the availability of these dolls could, in some people, create a similar sort of paradigm? I really don't know.
I think it could go one of two ways, because I think for some people it could be a very cathartic outlet for them. And that sounds like a very strange thing to say when you're talking about a sex doll as something being a cathartic outlet. But in another sense, what happens when the doll isn't enough, and it brings up this kind of inflammatory response when they're saying, okay, I have this doll, but it's not responding to me. And what happens when they need something more? That thought alone is kind of terrifying.
Yeah, I guess I just don't know if I know that the real doll analogy for preventing violent rape is not very good, because really, as I said, rape is about power and violence rather than sexuality. And you're not going to be able to sort of meet that desire I guess desire is the right word, with a real doll. Maybe there is something to this. And I also think what Rachel's alluding to, which is what if these dolls fuel the interest in committing real world acts of sexual assault on children? I just don't know.
Yeah, I think it opens a Pandora box that you don't really want to go down. But at the same time, while this is America, you got to let people do what they want and
this is Japan, but
well, this is Japan, but at the same time, I assume these are going to come to the United States at some point, and you're just gonna have to catch people doing bad things when they do it. That's kind of the state of the affairs.
So are video games then, violent video games, an outlet for young children who want to kind of express these violent tendencies in a safer way? That is a
can of worms that is widely studied, right? And there's two opposite camps on that. One which says violence in video games and movies consumed by children, and we can say children very young or more like adolescent, post-puberty age, has no impact whatsoever on real-world violence. There are others who seem to think the line is very direct. You can take a completely non-violent kid, have him play some violent video games, next thing you know, he's going to be in the real world shooting people up. What I believe, based on a number of interviews we've done, is that exposure to a variety of types of violence in individuals who are already predisposed to violence can sort of flip a switch. And this can include, it could include violent video games, it could include violent movies, but it also can just include violence at home, seeing domestic violence, being the victim of domestic violence, etc. And very often the focus is just on video games per se. I think there's very often that idea is completely oversimplified.